Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing fantastic. We're continuing our reading of the radical feminist book, The Sexual Revolution. It's quite loony, but it will benefit us to dissect it sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, page by page, so that when our children are presented with such nonsensical rhetoric in their schools, we are able to have rebuttals fully ready, and we will not be caught off guard when we encounter one of these miscreants in the public square. And this is a philosophy that is being transmitted via TikTok heavily and is really permeating through the American culture and will soon arrive to your shores because the internet exists. So let us prepare ourselves to go through mental gymnastics, and you can go ahead and listen to me as you're going about your day. Now, let's begin. There is no universal experience of womanhood or of manhood. Now, already right there. Okay. Universal experience. Well, for manhood and womanhood, you go through puberty, right? And that's going to be tied to your biology. For womanhood, you have pregnancy, you have your maternity recovery, and you have puberty, you have marriage. Part of being a woman is going through your motherhood rituals, and when you start to leave your innocent childhood and develop yourself into a more fully fledged woman. Now, when somebody says there's no universal experience, they're trying to imply that there are no common traits and that there aren't huge commonalities, and that the mentally ill can just identify and say that that's it, and that we real women and real men cannot disregard their woke philosophy, because to them there is no universal experience of womanhood or manhood. So to them, they ignore the coming of age rituals that existed for so many years for men, and how each culture had some way of testing a boy or a girl and to make them ready for adulthood. She continues, instead, this book describes many common experiences of sex, consent, and power, and invites every reader of every gender to try them on for size. Every gender. There's only two. See what I'm saying? So she's like, every gender, there's like 76. No, it's just two. The sexual scripts of our generation vindicate dominance and venerate violence. Now, what did she just say right here? Sexual scripts. So she's saying how men and women are typically and traditionally inclined to behave. So she's calling it a script. When you stick to the script, you're not allowed to deviate from that. It's like a interesting metaphor in a way that she's getting at. Because an actor, when you give them the script, they gotta stick to the lines, they can't deviate. So she's saying that we have some type of script. Vindicate dominance. So she's trying to postulate that dominance is needed and there's a vindication for the case, according to her enemies, right? And venerate violence. So she's gonna say here that boys have to be violent and that's bad, and that girls are dainty, She's quite bizarre. While censoring queerness, community, and pleasure. Now again, the pervertedness comes out here. Queerness. Right? So she's very into, I bet she's a porn addict. I really think so. She's really into, bending and blurring the lines. She probably has, a fecal obsession. She has a very dirty, pornographic mind, because the way she writes, she's obsessed with deviancy. And people who are really obsessed with deviancy are really pornographic in their brain and really unsafe around children. Now, pleasure. When someone ever brings up pleasure, they have a pornographic mind, because they don't see the downside to constantly seeking pleasure, right? To them, anything can be a pleasure, and that you're never supposed to not do something because you don't want to indulge so far so into the pleasurous rabbit hole. To them, there's no dark side in submitting to pleasure, right? It's like they're stuck in a porn movie. They're stuck in their own nasty pervertedness. They lack a sort of higher code of not being debased. They're constantly rolling around in the mud and then justifying it. Well before a young woman comes of age, she's made aware that her body is a commodity. Now, who is pushing the commodification? It's the feminists today. They're the ones saying do OnlyFans for pleasure. Okay? We're the ones saying don't sell yourself for $5. Give your beauty to your husband and don't put a price tag on you. But ironically, they don't see that they're the hypocrites here. And that the commodity is not wholly hers to command. Legislation has not eradicated the cultural logic of male entitlement to women's bodies. Okay, male entitlement of women's bodies. No, rather the women are commodifying themselves, and there is no male entitlement to the female body. You're not being auctioned. These subscription-based platforms are permission slips by the females themselves. Women are in full control now of their hedonism. They're fully capable of making better choices, yet don't. You can't blame men for that. You can't. And particularly to the bodies of black, brown, and indigenous women. Now, as a typical woke-tard, they hate white people. That's Polish, French, Italian, German, Bulgarian, Hungarian, Russian, Ukrainian. Anyone who's pale, they vehemently hate, and then they fetishize every other shade. When they say indigenous women, they're so ignorant that they think that every indigenous person is very brown or very black. There are indigenous peoples who come in all shades. All shades. Okay? Especially if they're a little bit mixed race or they just have a lighter pigmentation. But she tries to turn everyone against white people. She's vehemently a racist and hates straight people. It's very clear in her book. Who live with the historical trauma. Historical trauma. I don't believe in that. Why? Because the trauma my grandma suffered is not anything I can feel or comprehend. The only trauma I can understand is the trauma that I have lived myself, that my nervous system has been exposed to. You cannot inherit any type of trauma like that. Now, you can hear a sad story, feel sad for a few seconds, but at the end of the day, you're eating, you're laughing, you're going about your life, and that trauma isn't a looming, vibrant memory unless you're fetishizing it in your head and whipping yourself to it, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, me being part Cherokee, I don't sit and think about the Trail of Tears all day in America, being as an American. It's just not something that happens. It's a historical thing that happened. The red men ruled this land. They got wiped out. They lost the wars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that they lose. They were pagans. They're mostly gone. Now the Christians have it, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Vestigial memory of having been quite literally traded as commodities. Now again, the Colosseum, people fought to the death. When the Icelandic, the Vikings, all of them went around raiding, slavery existed, people lost, people were enslaved. When Gaius Julius Caesar conquered Gaul, there were some who were taken as captive. They came in different shades. It's just the way it goes. But see, they want to always bring up the past to keep people in this really shackled victim mindset, to blame everyone for their problems, to blame everyone for their inequities. I mean, you cannot time travel back to the past. So you must focus on what is here and now and the good and beautiful things of this life. So if you're constantly trying to focus on historical trauma and how for a moment in time a particular group of people were treated as commodities, that's really not productive, because all across the land, all throughout history, you see tragedies. If you were to cry for every tragedy in the world, you'd never stop crying. In Britain, 38% of girls aged 14 to 21 report verbal harassment in public places at least once a month. And one BBC survey documented that more than half of British women had experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. A study of 42,000 people in the European Union found that every second woman, 55%, has experienced sexual harassment at least once since the age of 15. Yeah, and there's a lot of girls, sadly, that sexually harass boys, right? Female teachers who have sexually molested boys, gay men who sexually harass men in the workplace. Also, lesbians sexually harassing other women, right? Sexual harassment is a problem. I really hate it. But let us not pretend that sexual harassment occurs within every particular gender persuasion, as in what you are hetero or you're not. Sexual harassment is a problem nonetheless, because there's jerks in the world. It doesn't make it right, but it is a problem. It is a problem, and it just shows how we need better manners. That's how I look at it. We need better manners, and blaming this upon straight men, this is just a problem. When women speak out of turn, we can expect to be punished. I mean, I speak out of turn all the time. I was never punished. Never punished. What is she thinking? We're going to be tied and whipped? We were being provocative. We should know our place. For me, I had been writing about politics for 2 years when I found the first hate site dedicated to fantasies about my R word and murder. I was 23 years old. All I had ever wanted to do was to describe my life as I experienced it and take part in a public political conversation. So, okay, that's horrible that somebody wrote that about her, right? But she has demonized religious people, white people, and straight people. And when you do something like that, you're going to ruffle feathers and have enemies. I mean, if prophets, peace be upon them all, had enemies, well, guess what? You're going to have enemies as someone who kicks a lot of hives, right? She wants to destroy the religious nuclear family and gender roles. So obviously, you're going to face opposition. They should be more mature and argue with you and do something better, but hopefully they can mature. But it's not surprising to see that people would just go so far. It's sad, but not surprising in today's age. I didn't expect to be punished for it so savagely. I mean, yeah, it is. Their rudeness is savage. But is it a punishment? It's not really something. It mentally afflicts you, but at the same time, it also gets you sympathy points, which helped you get right in this book. I didn't expect the pile-ons. Okay, the pile-ons, well, sorry, everybody does that. It's a horrible part of social media. I've been dogpiled on. I participated, unfortunately. I'm trying not to do that anymore and dog piles on. But it happens. The violent fantasies, yeah, that's pretty creepy. The vicious hate-mongering, well, she, ironically, is viciously hate-mongering against traditional patriarchal gender roles, and she's advocating for a total overthrow of the structure, which to me, this is hate-mongering. This is bad, and I consider her work viciously against the norm and disgusting. But I'm not gonna hate on her in a vicious way out in the world, but I'm gonna respectfully disagree with her, but a lot of what she's complaining about what people do to her, she does to others. From dedicated attack sites to the comment sections of more respectable publications. Well, people can have their views on you in comment sections, right? I didn't expect the frightening emails, the badly doctored porn with my face pasted on it. Yeah, deepfakes, that's a problem. That's horrible. I didn't expect to have to explain any of that to my family, my friends, my bosses. Well, if you're gonna say what she says here, these radical feminist, gender bender philosophies, you're gonna have to explain why you're getting pushback. You're not a damsel in distress who is, picking up Easter eggs and all of a sudden this mob of online trolls came after you. You were kicking hives, trying to change the established order that God has ordained, and now you're seeing that her form of activism is going to ruffle some feathers and there's going to be a tide that comes with that. All of whom were wondering what I had done to make these people so angry. So this is amazing. She has no self-awareness. She doesn't know what she's done to make people angry. It's just, what? I mean, hello, lady. She wants to make sex work easier to access. She degrades women by saying people who can become pregnant. So she's part of erasing true femininity, true womanhood, and is letting the woke rainbow mafia ruin how things are. And she thinks that women shouldn't depend on marriage. She is happy that family and faith are falling apart. She sees that the increasing freedom and sexual debauchery is good. She uses words like held hostage to male fragility. She hates that straight men exist because they give them male biological power. And she thinks that women are the property of men in this really strange way. Instead of seeing it as like under male guardianship and protected and safe, she makes it as property, as if this chattel narrative. I mean, we've gone through her book already, and she thinks that people won't be angry at her framing, her rhetoric, and her agenda, and her philosophy, and her vision on the world. That's what's so shocking. Is that she thinks that people are just going to be like, yeah, sure. Go against our religion. Go against the norm. And make everyone hedonistic perverts and porn users. Yeah, sure. No. You see what I'm saying? And if you don't recall what we were going through in the book, go back and check out, part 1, part 2, and whatnot. But it's just crazy. Just absolutely crazy that she doesn't think that any pushback is merited for her ideas. Especially when she is a racist. I hate to use that word because it's so played out. But she really hates literally millions of people in the world. And the number one group she hates the most is straight white men who are Muslim or Christian. Because they're patriarchal figures. Because she's forgetting that there are white Muslims. Right? And she's blaming all the sexual harassment just on straight men. Instead of acknowledging that it does occur in other categories as well. I mean, and then she called our view of gender authoritarian. Right? So she is attacking us with subtle, strong, potent, liberal, progressive rhetoric, and then thinks that we won't respond to her demonization of us. Go figure. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there. I post a lot of interesting things on there, and it helps support the channel. So let me know what you think, and I hope your head doesn't hurt after listening to her nonsense. Have a good day.